I'm delighted to say that David Leakey joins us now. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, sir.
Evening to you, Mark. I'd like to just point out I'm wearing a green shirt, put on specially for the occasion. It's my favourite shirt. I'm afraid it's a bit tatty, but it's the only green one I've got.
Well, look, it's very fetching, and it's in a good cause to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Lieutenant General David Leakey, CMG, CVO, CBE. What a career. Military bravery is in the family DNA, isn't it? Your father was a Major General, and you're related to two Victoria Cross winners.
Yes, my father was always known as the coward of the family. He won a DSO and 3 military crosses in the Second World War, but he was trumped by his elder brother, who won a Victoria Cross. And then more recently, my cousin won a Victoria Cross in Afghanistan about 6-7 years ago.
Have there been moments, David, in your career when you feared for your life?
Yes, but we don't talk about them.
Unlike certain members of the royal family, what has your time in the military taught you that could be of use, David, to us civilians who, with any luck, will never see war?
I think the two things I would think I would just pick on from my military career. One is respect, and speaks to all the things you were just talking about with your panel earlier. If people have respect for one another, then you get along much better. And people with hate speech don't exhibit respect. People who are in leadership positions who don't treat others with respect are no longer leaders. So respect is a big thing. The second thing I would point out is really understanding risk. And I don't think some of, in the present political climate, while some of our leaders and politicians and senior military and senior civil servants, diplomats, I'm sure they understand the risk, and the think tankers and the people who have a grasp on international affairs and what's going on in the world, in Russia and the Taiwan issues that are going on these days, I'm sure they will understand the risk. But I'm afraid that the great majority of ordinary people, and I count myself as one of those now, I'm retired from the military, but the majority of the people I speak to, whether it's in the pub, the local pub, in the shop, the people I work with, they don't really understand the great risks that we are running at the moment, and particularly with the Russia crisis as it's going at the moment. I don't think people realize the fact that we are actually at war. We Brits are not fighting. One or two people have gone to Ukraine to fight, but there is a war going on. It's a war of ideologies between the Russian autocracy and the Western idea of democracy. This is an ideological war that is going on. It's being fought on the ground at huge human cost in Ukraine, and it's being fought in the cyberspace, in the banking world. It's being fought in the economic sanctions world. And we are feeling the effects of it on the ground here with, for example, the shortage of tomatoes on supermarket shelves, to pick a really trivial and frivolous example. But the cost of living crisis, so many things that adversely affect the economic growth of this country, the well-being particularly of those who are worst off in our societies, are a direct, not entirely to blame, but a direct result of the war that's going on there. And if we don't put a stop to that war somehow quickly, then the problem will continue. And people will start to draw the wrong lessons. If Putin wins this war, if he's successful, if the West capitulates, then that will set a bad example for what China might think of doing in Taiwan. And we already see America with some reluctance. The American population itself is, I forget what the exact percentages are, but it's not unanimously in favor or in support of financial and military aid, or military aid to Ukraine. That's in the balance. And if the Republican Party was to win the next American election, presidential election, then that situation might even get worse. And And then what lesson would the Chinese take from that if they were to think about taking Taiwan back into the greater China? And what would that mean for escalation? And I think people don't realize the risks. So you asked me two questions. One is respect, really important thing, and the other is understanding risk.
The clock's against us, David. Briefly, if you can this awful war be resolved within the year?
I wish. And I fear it will not be resolved within the year because there is effectively stalemate in the conventional fighting on the ground in the east of Ukraine. And everybody around Ukraine, including the Russians themselves, are being quite cautious about not escalating the war with a sudden knee-jerk. And the greatest fear is that if somebody, the Americans, the Germans, the Poles, the EU, NATO, or Putin, the Russians, do something petulant, then there could be a dramatic and irrational response. And that is very dangerous and possible. And I think, therefore, there will be a continuing stalemate because the stasis is the calmest way to try and bring the war to some sort of conclusion, whether it's a diplomatic one or whether it's eventually an attritional exhaustion by one or both sides.
There you go, David. A sobering assessment of the challenges the West faces in defeating Vladimir Putin's aggression. You would argue we've all got skin in that game. We all have a stake in Ukraine's victory. Last but not least, former Black Rod. Why is this iconic but eccentric tradition so important?
Goodness me, it really is important. It's televisual. It excites people to switch their televisions on at the state opening of Parliament and look at one of our great traditions, a tradition that goes back 500 years. So, and you know, these traditions that we have in this country are the envy of the world, and for the right reasons. They form the fibers which make up the fabric or the tapestry of our country, of our heritage, of our constitution. And our constitution has been stable for a very, very long time, longer than any other country in Europe, I think I'm right in saying. And these sorts of things, the black roddery, as I call it, the guards who stand outside the royal palaces, the Queen's birthday parade, the state ceremonies that we have, these are some, not all, they're not unique in themselves, but they are some of the landmarks which are the anchor points of our country, our national identity, of the stability of our constitution, our heritage, our institutions, the glue, part of the glue that holds us all together. Very important.
David, a thrill to have you on the programme. Do join us in the studio soon. My thanks to Lieutenant General David Leakey, CMG CVO CBE. Thank you, sir.